Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lost in Translation show, where we explore yesterday to help mankind understand what's happening in the world today. Today, I have a special guest, Michele Lentz. She's coming to us from Minnesota. A lot's been going on in Minnesota, so we're going to ask her some questions about that. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And why don't we get right into the interview today? We've got a lot to cover, and I think this is really timely as many people are becoming aware of the war on our children. And as I've discussed in many past um, documentaries and interviews that I've done at the United Nations, as at the spearhead in the World Economic Forum of many of these agendas against our children. In fact, the United Nations passed legislation a couple years ago making it okay to molest a child as long as the child consents. So it's also in the founding documents in the Lucifer Trust to normalize pedophilia and take away parents' rights. So Michele Lentz, our special guest today, is the president and co-founder of the Child Protection League. It's now in its 12th year. In addition to administrative responsibilities, Michele educates and equips activists to protect children from exploitation, indoctrination, and violence. Michele has been a legislative assistant in the Minnesota Senate, active in multiple political campaigns, and started her civic involvement by volunteering at her local crisis pregnancy center over 35 years ago. With over 25 years experience in sales, marketing, and public speaking, Michele has proven her ability to make important issues understandable while moving people to action. She has a unique talent in connecting with her audience and engaging them to solution-oriented action. This makes her work advocating for the protection of children particularly valuable and effective. Michele knows the importance of proper education of children and a need for strong families in society. Her husband, James, and she have 9 adult children, ages 24 to 38, all of whom were predominantly homeschooled. Michele believes the destruction of society comes from the breakdown of the family, and the restoration of a broken society can only come through a strong moral foundation of faith and family. Thank you for joining us today, Michele. Welcome.
Thanks, Simone. I really appreciate the invitation to come on your show.
Well, I really enjoyed meeting you. Both of us went to a powerful event in Las Vegas a few months back called Vindicated. We had a great lineup of people, including Lara Logan, General Flynn. It was super interesting, and it was great to see that our movement on many levels of making people aware of what's really going on in society and how powerful. I know you started 12 years ago. I started my awakening campaign about 10 years ago, and it's amazing to see how many people come out for these events now.
Yeah, that's true. And getting together at events like the one that the Gateway Pundit put on in Las Vegas is so important for our movement. It's important for us to be together with each other, to build our spirits, to understand, because so much of this work that we do, I think, feels like we're doing it alone. And, we aren't in the sense of the majority of the population. The majority of the population of the United States are not activists like we are. And what we find out when we're together is that there's a whole lot more people who think like we do, but they don't necessarily, engage the way we do. One of my favorite quotes is by Mark Twain, and he said, "At the beginning of the change, the patriot is a scarce man, scorned and hated. But when his cause succeeds, I'm going to paraphrase the rest, everyone follows him because then it costs nothing to be a patriot." Right? And so that is a really timeless truth, that there are many people who are out front on the tip of the spear, and that's necessary. I often say that it it requires some of us to be willing to give it all so that other people can give a bit, they can give a little. Um, Only can they give a little because there are some people who are willing to give it all. And and that's okay. You just gotta say yes to what you're called to do, whether you're called to give a little or you're called to give a lot. But it wouldn't be possible for people to give a little if there weren't people out there who had crossed the Rubicon and said, I'm gonna give it all until we secure and save this country from the revolutionaries.
And is that why you decided to create the Child Protection League? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more of what prompted you and exactly what it's doing today.
Sure. Um, it it started out as a campaign, not as an organization. But when I was working at the Senate, there was a piece of legislation going through the process, and I'll use air quotes, right, called the Safe and Supportive Schools Act. And it was an anti-bullying legislation. And attention had been brought to it. It didn't pass the first year, but we knew they were hell bent on passing it. I asked a colleague who worked for Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann at the time to look at the legislation and was it as bad as we thought it was? And she said this is a piece of indoctrination legislation, and what it's going to do is open the door for comprehensive sex ed and all of the ideology that comes along with that. And I should give you a little bit of background story on that too. In in I think 2011, the largest school district in Minnesota, it's called Anoka Hennepin, was sued by the Obama administration, Office of Civil Rights, which until Trump was under the Department of Education. He just moved that over to the Department of Justice. They sued the Anoka Hennepin School District because Anoka Hennepin had a neutrality policy regarding homosexuality. In other words, the school district told their teachers, if a child asks you about homosexuality, you remain neutral and encourage that child to talk to their parents about it. And the Obama administration said that was discrimination and sued them. And they caved because school districts don't like being sued. And so when they caved, they signed a consent decree that forced them to implement 11 policy changes. After that, the governor of Minnesota, Mark Dayton, established a commission on bullying. And that commission a year later issued a report, and that report contained the same 11 policy changes from the Obama administration, right? Because none of this is organic. All of the schools in Minnesota already had anti-bullying policies. And all they did was contrive a situation in order to say that there was a problem that required a commission, right, to study bullying. And the outcome of that commission was this piece of legislation, right, that they were passing. And so the following year, the party that was pushing that legislation took control of the governorship and both houses, the House and Senate in Minnesota. So there was no doubt they were going to pass it. And they said they were going to pass it. So what happened was we formed a campaign to educate the public. And I'll just add, it's pretty difficult to educate the public that the Safe and Supportive Schools Act and anti-bullying legislation was actually bad, right? What are you for bullying, right? How can you be against an anti-bullying bill? And so we educated the public that it wasn't what they said it was going to be, which is so often, it's never what they say it's going to be, right? And they passed it, and the House members did an excellent job of making that party own uh, the damage that they were doing. And and so what happened was, knowing that we weren't going to be able to stop it, we formed a political action committee to hold legislators accountable for that vote. And we could only target four of them, but those four people lost their election the following year, because and there was a lot of issues in Minnesota, stand your ground laws, the marriage amendment, a lot of things had happened in Minnesota. So, but we did what little part we could, to help tip the needle. Unfortunately, what's often is the case is that the opposing party gets into power and they're somewhat feckless, right? And so we as people, um, can sometimes get frustrated because we don't see results coming from either of the main parties that are in control. Um, and
In the uniparty.
yeah, and that's because of the swamp, right? And so you and I have talked about the swamp, and I've experienced it. I experienced it working at the legislature. I've experienced it in this work. And and so we're a nonpartisan organization. I think we've angered people on both sides of the equation, but generally, um, we just tell the truth about these issues. And I'll tell you one more story about something that we did that ended up just having a huge impact. Is after that campaign, we were going to kind of close up shop. We'd never said we were going to start an organization. We did have to for IRS purposes, but so we decided to do a conference, and that was going to kind of be the end of it. But the very next week after that conference, and this brings it right up to the present day because this is a current issue now in our country. The Minnesota State High School League, which is the quasi-governing body that regulates high school competitions, was passing a policy to allow boys into girls' locker rooms to play on their teams, etc. This is 2014. And this people came to us and said, "Will you help with this issue?" So we did. We took out a full page ad in the largest newspaper in Minnesota. And I just love that they put it on the back of the sports section. But you'll just have to imagine this. It was the picture of a shower wall. And written on the shower wall, it said, "A male wants to shower next to your 14-year-old daughter. Are you okay with that?" And then underneath, we put all the contact info for all of the members of the Minnesota State High School League who were going to pass this policy. And it went viral. In the following 3 weeks, I had 42 interview requests from all across the country. They wrote articles about this ad in New Zealand, the UK, and Australia. And everybody wanted to talk about this ad, right? And so we used that as a platform to talk about the issue. Then we came out with another ad that was a picture of a young woman, sitting in the dugout with her softball bat. And the tagline was, "Is this the end of girls' sports?" And how prophetic were both of those ads, right? Now, the Minnesota State High School League canceled their next meeting. They put the meeting on for the month of December, and there was like over 200 people showed up for this event, and they ended up not passing the policy, but they passed it as an appeals process so that the other side could claim victory. But we actually won that battle because they weren't able to force that on the schools. The revolutionaries who are pushing these kinds of policies because they know that they weaken people. They weaken people, they weaken families, they weaken society, and that gets them to their end goal. Of course, they weren't going to stop. And so they started suing school districts for not letting boys play on girls' sports. And under the the Obama administration, they were able to get pretty far in those lawsuits. And that brought us up to the current day where now we have the Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights are just sent a letter to the Minnesota State High School League and the Minnesota Department of Education saying you have 10 days to change your policy, right? You have 10 days to issue a policy saying that boys can't play on girls' sports or else you're going to lose federal funding. So we've come full circle now. It took from 2014 till now 11 years and the Trump administration for this to finally change. But you've probably seen the polling data. Over 80% of the public don't think boys should play on girls' sports. It's common sense. This has been being shoved down our throat, hasn't it? And finally, there's a reckoning for it. So that is a couple of the highlights of things we did in the past. And our biggest objective for the next year is a campaign that we started called Child Protection League Join the Movement. And our our aim in this campaign is to unite people across all demographics to come together and stop letting the revolutionaries divide us because that's a tactic of subversion when you want to overthrow a society, right?
Well, it's also
And
an aspect of communism when they have the children turning against their own parents. I've
oh
lived
boy,
in several communist countries before and after communists took over.
that's happening as I'm sure you well know. And so that campaign is designed to help break the dividing narratives that are going on in our country. And we believe that protecting children is one area where we can all come together and begin to counter that revolutionary tactic of dividing us. And so that's what we're working on. We're going to have a conference next spring. People should sign up for our email updates and you'll find out about that. Laura
Is that
Logan is
April
our
25th?
keynote.
Is that the one we're
April,
talking about?
yep, April
Okay.
25th. Yep.
In what
We
city?
I'm sorry.
In Minnesota, but what city?
Yeah, I'm not sure the location yet. It'll be in the Twin Cities area and it'll be streamed online. So people can if you can't come to Minnesota, you can still participate in the conference. And so Laura
Do
Logan
you
is
ask
our
people to kind of organize a little neighborhood
that's
group and
right,
watch it
watch parties.
together, invite
Yeah.
people over for some snacks and a glass of wine and see if we can,
Yeah.
work together?
Yeah, so Laura Logan, Mel K, Dr. Michelle Cretella on healing gender dysphoria. She's just going to be excellent. Center for American Liberty, which is a pro bono litigant firm started by Harmeet Dillon. They will be there. So we've got a couple more. We've got a great lineup of speakers. It'll be an all-day event. And what's the purpose? To bring us together because the community of patriots is what's going to save our country. And so we have to keep educating like you do. We have to keep activating, inspiring people to get active at their local level in whatever issue God is calling them to. I come work with us at the Child Protection League. I can say that, but if you're called to maybe work in the Second Amendment issue, well, God bless you because the same enemy is trying to destroy us there. And so we can unite and under this banner of Child Protection League join the movement and still work in whatever respective areas we're called to work. And we feel that passion to work in. That's what I love about this movement, is it's broad enough so that people can go where they're inspired and where their passions are.
Well, and
Because the
kind of like
enemy
where
is the
you and I
same.
where you and I met at the Vindicated tour, we had the tax people, we had the gun rights people, we had like just the people around us and our booths. We're all
Yeah.
fighting basically for the same rights, just under different umbrellas. Is there a way that people can open up a branch of your organization, or do you have like a formula business plan for someone who might want to start the organization in another state?
We don't we don't have chapters nationwide because we're an all volunteer organization, and so we don't have the bandwidth to manage that. But we do network with over 250 individuals and groups across the country. One network that we're active in is called the Protect Child Health Coalition, which was actually started by Judith Reisman, who is the person that brought us together with the other co-founders of the Protect Child Health Coalition. That network allows us to collaborate with people all across the country. So let's say there is somebody in Illinois who is interested in the work we do, and they contact us. The first thing that we will do is put them in touch with organizations in Illinois that are already doing the kind of work that we do. And so what I have found is that there are organizations like that in most states, but not all. The other thing that we will do is make our material available to anybody who wants it.
Okay.
And we because we're all volunteers, because we are, donor funded, because we don't have to answer to any big donors, we just can live our mission and work on the mission of protecting children without any of those sometimes conflicts of interest. So it allows us to be truly independent, but it also kind of motivates us to just make our stuff available, right? I only have one goal, and that's for you and me and everybody else in the patriot movement to win back our country from the globalists, the communists, the jihadists, and anyone else who is trying to destroy it. And I don't care who gets the credit. I don't. So if we have something that's available to other people, then we just give it away for them to use.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I wish we could be bigger and stronger and, like Moms for Liberty have chapters everywhere, but that's not our business model.
Of course.
However, we will network with anybody who needs help.
Okay, that's great to hear. And I'm going to leave all your contact information at the bottom and also the event date of your upcoming event in the new year. Um, Now, you kind of focused on the education system, what we've learned, and if you've watched any of these cases, that our schools and social service organizations that are supposed to be protecting children are actually being funded, driven, and given their agendas by these same dark forces that we've been discussing. So, how are parents able to see what's going on in their school and then push back against it? If they do see something, like you said, there's a lot of money and the government behind some of these programs. So, can you help us out a little on that?
Well, I think that we're going to need a little help from above when it comes to child protection services, the social welfare system, um, and I mean high above, and I also mean at the federal level. Uh, the as remember Senator Schaefer from Georgia,
Yes.
the senator who exposed the corruption in child protection services and lost her life because of it. Um, there's plenty of evidence that the system is broken and the system has been infiltrated. And I think there is a level of exposure that is increasing that has to do with child trafficking and child exploitation. And so we are going to watch that increase all together as a country. And, we will probably be increasingly shocked at who the players are in the exploitation of children. It's already happening. So, this isn't me having some kind of inside knowledge. This is just me looking at what's obvious to all of us, that this is a very bad problem. Who is the biggest consumer of pornography in the world? It's the United States, right? And so that addiction, that problem, manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But unfortunately, the realization, I think, for Americans over the last 4 years is that every element of our society has been infiltrated. And that includes our government agencies. So in Minnesota, that's no different. I think we might be worse than some states. And I believe that there's a lot of good social workers out there. There's a lot of good people who work in government, who work in child protection services. But the reality for parents is that that system is probably not very trustworthy. And depending where you live, it might be worse than other places. My first advice is stay out of the welfare system and stay out of the court system. That's my first advice. Do whatever you can to stay out of those systems, because once you get sucked in, you lose control, at least some control of your life and your upbringing of your children. I think the next piece of advice I would give parents is you have to be educated about what's going on and what are the signs, what are the signs of indoctrination? What are the signs that something's being held back from parents, right? Um, because you you need to be able to see what's going on. Like, knowledge is your power there. If you are oblivious to what's going on, then you can't do a thing about it because you don't know what's happening. If you know what's going on and you see a situation or you discover, something, then you're in a better position to take the appropriate actions. And I don't know what that would be because it would depend on the situation itself. Getting educated, being vigilant, keeping your own family as best you can out of those systems, I think are very general, pieces of advice, but off the top of my head, probably what I would suggest.
Well, our country is ruled by a foreign hostile corporation known as the Federal Reserve System, and they use child sacrifice and slavery as part of their Babylonian money magic. It's kind of strange to talk about, but it is actually part of their practice. They've been murdering and abusing children throughout millennia. If you want to go back to Jesus's time, the family that child trafficked, we hear a lot of people don't understand the center of the Roman Empire was Turkey. The largest two slave ports were Turkey. And today, through underground tunnel systems that have existed for thousands of years, children from the Middle East and women and children have been brought into Ukraine, Romania, and Turkey through these systems. During Jesus's time, this family was known as the Baccarats. You might be familiar with Baccarat Crystal today. They then changed their name to Bauer, Eddie Bauer, sexualizing children. And if you notice, the head of Eddie Bauer is now in prison for trafficking children. And their name today is Rothschild. So this is the system we exist in. The original banks in Europe were founded by slave money. indoctrinating our children is modern day slavery. And what we see, one of the reasons there's this big trans movement, because a symptom of severe sexual child abuse is transgenderism. And you can see it in many people who went through the government systems. So you were mentioning not to go into a court, because when you go into a court, if you notice behind them is an American flag with fringe around it, meaning we're being under Roman law, the City of London law, not the constitutional law. And when we go into the court, we are invisible, especially if we hire a lawyer, we declare ourselves mentally insane. And the jury box nor the judge can see us in their system. So that is why we must refrain, especially from the federal system. And this is
Mm,
why you see individual groups and people all over the world fighting back, because a lot of us understand what we're really fighting. And we can put it in the category of child abuse, human trafficking, slavery, communism, but it's all this one system. And right now, they've lost the adults who understand history and remember what the world used to be like. So we've got, Alzheimer's and all these things that are affecting our old people. We've got autism and all these things that are affecting. That's part of their eugenesis program, because they want us to get to the point where our older people really aren't valuable to us. We might as well euthanasia them. Our young disabled children have no value, which are cause created by big pharma. We have massive problems. So now we can just say, oh, let's just kill those children because they don't contribute to society. So under communism, disabled people don't exist. Go around a communist country, you're not going to see anybody with
mm,
a wheelchair ramps or any of those things, because those people are usually institutionalized and put in homes where they're starved, beaten, or tortured to death or something of that sort, because they
mhm,
do not consider those people also to be God's children. So you're fighting something that we all have to understand. The good and evil is an eternal battle, and that we all sat aside for quite some time. We've known about these trafficking since I was a child, under the Bush administration, the finders, where they were going around and they were kidnapping children. I live in a First Nations, Americans call them Indians, but I spent a lot of time outside the United States. They call them the First Nations people because they were here first,
mm,
and see what's been done to them, because they actually are connected to the lines of Jesus, and that they've been extracted and brought to other nations, and then their history has been removed. So we're going through so many really, like, what's going on with the child trafficking is nothing new. The Romans used to conquer areas, and then the oldest child in the Bible, who's the one who leads the family and takes on the responsibility and traditional roles all over the world to this day. But the Romans would go in and force them, they would take the first child, who would be the one who would lead the rebellion against the Romans, and they would turn them into sex slaves. So they destroyed their minds, and they could control them so they would not be able to rebel at a later date. So these same mechanisms have been used throughout history. We just need to call them out. And I so respect what you're doing. I imagine there's some danger. Now, in the news lately, there's been a lot about the corruption of the Minnesota government, especially as related to the Somali population that's living there. I think they exposed that a majority of people that are there have committed some kind of crime, fraud, abuse against the system. And obviously, they were supposedly taking millions to feed children. It was being siphoned out. It's all going back to Somalia, where child forced marriage,
mhm,
feminine, when they take out a woman's clitoris, I forget what that's called, and forced marriage and child slavery. And slavery is still illegal. Actually, Ilhan Omar's father was running the death squads for the secret police. So we've extracted these people, and now we've brought all the criminals in here. Now that the Civil War is over, we've extracted all the people who were doing the awful things, and we brought them to the beautiful state of Minnesota, which my family actually came from in
mm,
1917 when our family moved west. So
mm.
we have a connection to New Ulm and the dramatic changes that have gone on in your state. I know that's kind of a long question, but Can you kind of take me through a little bit of that? And I
It's
know Somalis, even if they're into all this other stuff, usually aren't into gender inversion. So I'm
yeah.
trying to see like how it connects and how it separates
Well,
there.
it's simple and it's complex. It's complex because um well, let me start with it's simple. It's simple because it's revolution. And the revolution in our midst, which part of our mission statement is, I'll just read it, we equip and activate parents and the public to reclaim self-governance and to expose and defeat the cultural revolution in our midst, right? Why do we have a Somali problem with fraud and marriage fraud and government contracts fraud, the feeding our future, whatever, that massive fraud that was exposed, and now the Department of Human Services here is acknowledging that we have really bad fraud in the state of Minnesota. Well, is it a fluke or is it by design? Is it a fluke that the recent headlines regarding the census in the United States showed that under the last administration, blue states were consistently overcounted and red states were undercounted, causing like a loss of I don't know how many
I think it was
congressional
five.
seats.
Yeah.
Five, yeah. Minnesota was one of the states that was overcounted, right? Why do we have an increasing Somali population here? Why do we have um, NGOs like Catholic Charities and Lutheran Social Services taking grant money from the federal government to assist illegal immigrants or illegal aliens to settle in certain parts of the country, right? It's all by design. It's not just a coincidence, but Minnesota, was targeted for that. And so it's simple. It's revolution. It's complex because there's a lot of it here. There's a lot of fraud here. It's involving a lot of different areas. Our housing industry, our poverty industry, right? Feeding the poor. It was what's come out recently about the marriage fraud, where these people were lying about, who they were married to, or so it's complex in that there's a lot of tentacles to that fraud. But and I think oftentimes it's just overwhelming for people when they kind of their eyes start to open. Like I think the pandemic caused a lot of people's eyes to open, like something's not right in this country. And thank God that they started to wake up to that. But it gets overwhelming the more they dig and understand. And I think sometimes, um, I mean, you said it succinctly. It's good versus evil. It's an eternal battle. And and so it's going to look often like evil is winning. But we have to remember, evil doesn't win. Evil loses. And the what will prevail in the end is truth and love, because truth and love is the definition of God. And so, why do we stay engaged? What can we do? And how can we do it? At a very basic level is, I think, just important to realize that the people that we meet, right, are fellow human beings. Let's just tell the truth and let's love one another. That will go a long way to healing our country. Tell the truth and love one another. We might not be able to, from our level, take care of our central bank problem, which is at the source, like you said, of so much of the evil in this world. But we can love the neighbor that God puts in front of us today and tell the truth to them, right? Tell the truth to them that a boy can't possibly become a girl, right?
Right.
That's
And
a
you'll
simple
argue
one.
with people, college students, especially when you used to see the Charlie Kirk interviews and they'd come up and they'd say stuff. And, it's interesting that you use the word pandemic. Okay. Because that's kind of unusual. When did a lot of this stuff start getting exposed from Tom Hanks? Was when we all had time to see what our children were learning in school. But we have
Mhm.
to go back because we have to understand that these are ancient practices. Who is Pan? He was the
Mm,
perverted god of bisexuality. If you go where the fallen angels fell today on Mount Hermon, the United Nations has its capital there because United Nations is a satanic organization, and we've got the pandemic. So basically, during this time when Pan's dungeon, which is at the bottom, is where they would murder, rape, and sacrifice all the children for what was going on at the top of Mount Hermon, right? So Pan, it was called Pan's dungeon. So we see Pan America, right?
mm,
Pan Am, they had the airplanes like Jeffrey Epstein, like Donald Trump had, what the government was using to smuggle children in from other countries, even back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when Pan Am. So we even have to look at the words they throw out to us. If you understand who Pan is, you understand what's going on right here because this is what they're
mhm,
openly displaying. And in the ancient times, we had I know that you've seen with the Twin Towers how they bought the Arch of Baal, which is Satan,
mhm,
and they tried because that was a massive blood sacrifice of the innocent. They put the temple of Baal, the Arch of Baal, they tried to put it in front of the Twin Towers. They were unable to do that. They put it 3 or 4 blocks away, but
mm,
you would have to go through that
mm,
Baal to the Pan's dungeon, and then you would ascend where the fallen angels thrive on the top of
mm.
Mount Hermon. So when you really understand even the words they give us, they were frequently telling us what they're doing. And the pandemic to me was the awakening of so many of the things that you and I have been talking about. So
Yeah, there's I think the gray is, dissipating and things are becoming more black and white about what is good and what is evil. And I think this is why you're seeing people who were um like wouldn't weigh in on it in the past, all of a sudden saying this is evil, like um I, without thinking of an example. I think Tucker Carlson might have been an example of somebody who all of a sudden started saying this is just evil. you know uh I thought that was kind of interesting to see that emerge on the pundit level, in
well,
our
Tucker
national
Carlson himself
discourse.
went to an exclusive boarding school that was later either closed or shut down for a while because of massive sexual abuse. And I've heard him several times over the years indicate that he was familiar with this kind of stuff. So it may have hit
Mm,
home. I'm
mm,
not sure that it was him, but he is
yeah.
obviously aware of, been friends with, or related to somebody who's been in this
Mhm.
kind of situation because if you are listening, you hear him say it sometimes. So that could have literally been what it was awakening. He also was probably exposed at Fox News to a lot of stuff that you're not
Yeah,
allowed to
probably.
report on Fox News. And
Yeah.
so, and even the
It's
term
swampy.
MAGA is the highest level warlock in the Church of Satan, started in Hollywood, California. So
Mm,
MAGA comes from the term magician, magi,
hmm.
referring to the wizards and the sorcerers in the Temple of Solomon. So I pointed out that MAGA is not a good term. They have us constantly repeating us. Whenever they're throwing us out words they want us to repeat, we have to be careful that we're not spell casting or bringing bad energy on ourselves if you believe in those kind of things. But obviously they do because they have us doing it all the time. So we have to be aware of even the words we're using and the sometimes we're looking to people who are neck deep like you said, with a lot of the politicians in this child trafficking. I don't know if you've ever talked to Dave Janda. He's a former congressman, and
I'm
he
familiar with who it is. I've never spoken with him though.
he goes into detail about how he was warned immediately going to DC to never attend an evening party. And apparently he did one time, and there was openly children, especially females, but a lot of men too. A lot of people don't understand that in the occult world, their practices are actually what they feel is the true epiphany to God. So when
Mm,
you really get into the belief structures of these different structures, we understand and why they're putting all these perverts in place because they're getting called out. And
mm,
as Jesus's time, he said, other than hurt a child, put a stone around their neck. The only time I ever, outside of the other people who involved and have illustrated the Bible, I never saw Jesus speaking about hurting anyone except in that particular time. And he was challenging the Baccarat child human traffickers that still control our society to this day.
you were talking about the manipulation of language and the danger um of the words that they, put out there, and then we end up, it becomes part of the narrative and part of the vernacular, right? And so at our website, cplaction.com, we have a lot of resources. I encourage people to go to cplaction.com and just look at I mean, it's a huge website in that there's just so much. You can just dig deeper and deeper and deeper into any of the issues that we've covered and the kind of historical um, background on some of them, because in 12 years we've archived quite a bit, of ground there. But one of the most important things I think for parents to equip themselves with is an understanding of how the revolutionaries manipulate language. And it comes right out of Marxism. I'm sure you know this, and your viewers are probably well versed in this. And that's really important, because if you can understand the manipulation of language, then you can stop it from happening, right? And, so how they used Safe and Supportive Schools Act, perfect manipulation of language, social emotional learning, a perfect example of how they manipulate language to make something sound good, to hide what their real agenda is. And once they succeed in implementing their agenda, they they gaslight you that they never lied to you about what they were going to do, right? That this was always what the words meant.
Right.
But and that's just classic gaslighting, and it leaves people just stunned, like, what just happened to me? But
Well,
to prevent you from experiencing that level of trauma, you've got to get savvy about how they manipulate. I mean, public school officials, legislators, agency people, the media, how they manipulate the language. And once you realize you've been lied to or that you've been manipulated, you break it. They can't manipulate you again after
Rules for
that. Once,
Radicals, the book.
right?
It explains
After,
exactly that's the Communist Manifesto for the West.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
well,
it's
let's
key.
remember what the word government actually means. It comes from the Latin word mind control.
Mm.
So there
Like
you go.
television.
Tell
Just
live
like
vision.
television.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so is there any way someone could direct you, contact you? I know you just
Yep.
gave out the website, and is there anything else that you want to add? It looks like we're wrapping up to about an hour now.
Yeah, I mean, go to cplaction.com. There's a contact form there. You can contact me um right from the website. Um all our social media is on there. I guess here I'll hold this up. People can, let's see.
Oh, I'm
If
going
you
to
go to
put
our
that on.
website, you can take the pledge, right, to protect children. And we'll send you this water bottle sticker that says I took the pledge. And you'll also get some of these cards, which have a QR code on the back. And on the back it says, Children are in danger. CPL's Join the Movement is uniting people across the country to get informed and help to protect kids from trafficking, online exploitation, violence, bullying, medical abuse, indoctrination, and more. So we'll give you some of these cards and the sticker. Um, you just take the pledge on the website so that you can, when you're drinking your water bottle and people are like, what's that sticker? You just hand them one of those cards, and just tell them, hey, I've joined the movement. We've had enough, right? We're taking back control, and we're going to start speaking up, showing up, and advocating to protect kids. And that is something you don't have to be Republican, Democrat, Christian, Muslim, anything Jewish. We can unite because none of us want to see kids getting hurt.
Well, and we'll end on that note. Thank you so much for all your information. I'm really looking forward to learning more about it. I'm going to go take the pledge myself, so maybe some people that are following me will too. And thank you so much again, Michelle, for coming on. As always, do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Our goal here is just to open up people's minds and make sure that never again will the truth be lost in translation. This is Simone and Michelle signing off for today. Thank you for listening.